Hello and welcome to now the super regional action. We're going to preview this super regional in Division II baseball, and we're excited for the 16 teams that are remaining. A lot of excitement going from the regionals, few upsets, a few teams, expected to do the job, got the job done. You can see here in our combined sheet that Will and I have both worked on that all but one number one overall seed in each region made it to the Supers. West Chester was the only one in the Atlantic region that did not, while two last place seeds in their respective region, Georgia College and Angelo State, made it to the Supers as well. And then we have 3 of 8 matchups that are 1v2 seeds, and we're going to break it down all for you. We're really excited for it. Will and I have just been talking all week about how excited we are for super regional action and ready for more Division II baseball, as we are 1 week closer to Cary and 1 week closer to having those final 8 teams where they will battle it out to see who will reign on top in 2024. Will, give us some initial thoughts here on what you're looking forward to here in the super regionals.
Yeah, it was a fantastic week of regional action and really looking forward. I enjoy the super regional format a lot. And when it was introduced in 2019 and then picked back up in 2022, 23, and now 24, just the 4th time that it's been used. And there's some teams that have been able to punch a ticket to the supers every time in this particular format. But I really enjoy it because those 8-team, perhaps 7-team, and sometimes 6-team double elimination brackets all at one site. It gets really difficult, and this more models what Division I does, and obviously that's what Division II is trying to get to, increasing numbers of teams in the tournament, and also having the format in a way where you get another week of regional action and you get a 3-game series for a trip to go to Cary, North Carolina. I really enjoy the format, excited to see this 4th rendition of it, and really looking forward at this time of the year. Some teams that have played well all year long atop our rankings, like Tampa, Central Missouri, they're here. Then you got some other teams that kind of snuck out of nowhere and find themselves in a position as well to still punch a ticket to the coveted place of Cary, North Carolina. So I'm really looking forward to breaking down all these matchups for you. That's what we plan to do here. Like you said, Robert, breaking down every single regional super regional matchup here in all 8 regions and tell you what we think about these matchups, and ultimately some of the key players and key numbers that maybe you want to look at headed into these super regional matchups as well.
Absolutely. And so we'll get right into it. We'll talk a little bit about each super regional preview and then, go right into it. But first, in the Atlantic, we have Indiana, Pennsylvania, who went unbeaten. IUP went unbeaten there in the Westchester regional, ultimately beating Charleston 2-1 in extras to get here. Seton Hill came all the way back from the losers bracket, losing that second game to East Stroudsburg before winning against Millersville and then beating East Stroudsburg twice to get here. UCM went unbeaten in their regional. UAM went unbeaten in their regional. Oh, I should mention that the Atlantic is all PSAC, so no matter what, a PSAC team will be represented in Cary. While as in the Central, we have an MIAA versus the Great American matchup, 2 teams that have won their respective regular season won their respective regular season titles. UAM clinched a share of it, while UCM won it outright, and then UAM also won the GAC conference tournament as well. And then the East, we have Southern New Hampshire and Malloy, NE10 versus ECC matchup. Saginaw Valley, who ended up losing their first game but won the next 2 to advance on. UIndy lost their first game and fought all the way through the losers bracket to get to the title game and ultimately beating Maryville to advance here in the super regional. Back-to-back super regionals for them. Tampa, surprisingly, a team that obviously you mentioned super regional format is relatively new, but a team that hasn't seen the super regional since 2019, surprisingly. But then you have Tampa, Embry Riddle, and that's a Sunshine State versus Sunshine State matchup. Catawba and Georgia College. Catawba lost their first game. Albany battled back. Georgia College went unbeaten, as that's a South Atlantic Conference versus Peach Belt Conference matchup. Then we have an all Lone Star matchup between Lubbock and Angelo State. Both teams went unbeaten in their regionals. Then we have Point Loma and Cal State Monterey Bay, a Pac West versus CCAA. Point Loma swept their regional, while Cal State Monterey Bay ultimately had to win twice to advance by beating San Francisco State, and they ultimately did. So we'll get right into Atlantic, and Will, take it away. Let's give a preview here of the Atlantic region, super regional.
Yes, indeed. So you've got Seton Hill and Indiana. This matchup will be at Indiana University of Pennsylvania at Owen J. Doherty Field. And Seton Hill, they have a 20-7 all-time advantage in the head-to-head. However, IUP earlier this year, they took 3 of 4, and that was really a turning point, Robert, midway through April in both of these team seasons. I think for Indiana, showing Seton Hill, a team that out of their division, they don't typically lose series, and they ultimately fall to a Steve Klein-led group for this Indiana team that has just been such a great turnaround, one of the best in the country to get to this point. That Seton Hill turned it on after that series, and I think for Indiana, they kind of showed everybody, hey, the Crimson Hawks are a legit team, and these were the top 2 teams in the PSAC West Division, which was certainly interesting with how dominant the East was this year. So first time these teams are meeting in postseason action. Seton Hill 40-15. They were 20-8. They finished 1 game ahead of Indiana for that division crown. You look at Steve Klein, 88-66 in 3 years, but they go from just 2 wins a few years back to, getting to a position to be in a super regional. First ever trip. I know that kind of sounds dramatic when we say that about some teams because, again, this is just the 4th year of this format. However, it's just their first regional trip of any kind since 1990 and their first regional win that they got last week when they were able to advance in their pod. And for Seton Hill, they had to go through a gauntlet as well. They're back to the supers for the 2nd consecutive year. 13 of the last 14 years, they've been in the NCAA tournament. And what Coach Marizaldi has done has been so impressive. 731 victories, and putting this team in a position who went to the World Series in 2021 and has plenty of players who pitched and played and carry that season, then in the supers last year, and now you get to a position where they're going back to back. It's a very experienced group. And Robert, I would love to talk a little bit about some of these players in the Atlantic region, super regional, because there are some really impressive players to talk about. And when we start talking about some of the players as we move on to the next tab here, I think that you really want to highlight, starting with Seton Hill, their first team all-region selection, Jack Oberdorf, 345 this year. And he, along with Owen Mandler, a freshman of the year, a couple of standout freshmen that we're going to talk about here today, one in the Central region and one right here in the Atlantic region, along with many other pretty impressive players. When you can get a newcomer to come in on a team that was coming off the heels of a berth a season ago and perform the way he did, he was very impressive. And then you had Max Mandler as well. Both the Mandlers doing great work for Seton Hill. They both put together impressive seasons. But for me, Seton Hill is all about their pitching. They're top 5 in the country in strikeout to walk ratio and ERA as a staff. You look at Aiden Layton and Brandon Berger, they're going to throw a lot at Indiana, and it's going to be tough for them to handle such great pitching. You got Zilly out of the bullpen who does great work. He's got 5 saves, but two really dominant starters in Berger and Leighton. On the other side for Indiana, Harrison Pontoli, he's hitting 290 with 41 runs driven in. He's a 3-time all PSAC selection. He's been just a key cog for this program's turnaround. And then Ricardo Aponte, who was really clutch throughout the postseason for them through the tournament and when they made a deep run in the tournament along with that regional pod. He had a lot of success, and he's hitting 333 this year. And for their starters, it's probably going to be Leighton and Berger in those first 2 games against Mark Edinburgh and Derek Shields in those 2 on the other side for the Crimson Hawks. And they both have put together and thrown the ball really well as of late, and that's really helped them put themselves in a position to be in the Super Regional. Both of them have 7 wins apiece. And you look at the walk numbers really across the board. Aiden Leighton, 87-18, and then Berger, 68-27. On the other side, you got 50-17 and 63-11. So both teams compete in the zone, and both teams limit the number of walks while getting a lot of strikeouts. And I think that Edinburgh versus whoever he goes up against is going to be a fantastic matchup. Yeah, Shields, Tooley out of the bullpen's been nice for them, and I think that that's kind of a highlight of some of the top players. You look at multiple all-region selections on the offensive end for both of these teams, or all-conference selections and a couple all-regions for Seton Hill, but that is kind of the matchup right there. Couple really quality arms. Leighton's been certainly a workhorse with 82 and a third toss this season. He's been one of the best pitchers around, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see these pitching matchups. That's what this Atlantic region's been all about all year long, Robert. What are you most looking forward to between Seton Hill and Indiana?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That pitching matchup's going to be very interesting. With you have Shields, you have Edinburgh for IUP, you have Berger and Leighton there for the 2 starters. So we expect, Leighton against Edinburgh and Berger against Shields. But again, to be determined on that rotation of games 1 and 2. But you mentioned it earlier, like Ricardo Aponte's been tearing it up in the postseason. He hit that big extra inning home run in the 10th to ultimately go to the Supers to beat Charleston 2-1. And of course, you have that offense with Oberdorf, and the Mandlers, and being able to just build out that offense and being successful in that way allows these opportunities, for a great matchup between these 2 teams. And I'm excited to see, which team will prevail in terms of pitching. We know Seton Hill has the 3rd best ERA in the country at 3.44. They also have the 2nd best fielding percentage in the country at 981 as well. So between those 2 things, that you say pitching and defense wins championships. Well, the advantage there goes for Seton Hill. So very excited to see how these 2 teams play out, and between teams that I like or don't like. Both of these teams, can make a great case, but I lean towards Seton Hill on this one. Again, with that pitching and defense, with the numbers that they are and the experience that they have. I know experience isn't tells a whole story, but it has a little bit of a story. Being in the Supers last year, falling short to Millersville, I think that will help prepare them to maybe go back to Cary as they did in 2021.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that when you look at Indiana, I mean, it's just a fun story to follow. I will say they've only lost 4 games at home all year long. And obviously, you look at what they've done this season. They started the year off getting swept by UNC Pembroke, and they competed in not really any of those games. They got beat pretty bad. And looking back at it, okay, UNC Pembroke, one of the best teams in the country, they play so well during PSAC action. Obviously, they have the massive series against Seton Hill that certainly propelled them to get an opportunity on the road to take 3 of 4 against them. I feel like this group certainly is going to be confident come Friday when you get to play in front of your home fans. But I'm going to pick Seton Hill as well because of that great pitching. I will say, yeah, going to beat Charleston and Westchester, and obviously that 10-inning thriller to ultimately be undefeated against the number one team in the region. That certainly gives this group a lot of credibility, but with Seton Hill's pitching staff, it's going to be hard to ultimately go against them. For me, they're deep, and obviously those starters are horses for them, and so that's why I would lean towards Seton Hill in this series to make my pick.
Yeah, either way, it's going to be an exciting one. Excited for both coaches. Being able to just be 2 wins away from Cary, North Carolina can be very exciting. So this will be an exciting matchup. As we go to another exciting matchup, and I'll get started on talking about, is Central Missouri against Arkansas Monticello. They're in the Central region, the Super Regional, as 2 teams. One, a storied program in Central Missouri. The other one, Arkansas Monticello, getting the furthest they've ever been here in postseason action and program history. Is the last time Arkansas Monticello was the furthest that they were in the postseason was 2016, where ultimately they lost to Central Missouri there in the regional final. Again, the super regional format wasn't adopted until 2019, so that was back when what Will mentioned earlier was those 6, 7, or 8 team regionals where the best that comes out of it advances to Cary, and there's no super. So in that time, it was UCM and UAM in the regional final to go to Cary, and ultimately UCM ended up beating them there May 23, 2016. But the last time these 2 teams played in the regular season was at Minute Maid Park 2 years ago in that Houston Winter Invitational, where UCM goes down because, again, the owner of the Astros, Jim Crane, went to Central Missouri, and he provides us a small tournament there at the beginning of the season with a few teams there. But very interestingly enough, 4 of those 5 games that they played each other, UCM has the advantage 3-2. 4 of the 5 have been at Minute Maid, while that one other time was that 2016 regional finals. You can see the schedule here: 3:00 on Friday, 2:00 Central on Saturday, and then the if necessary game 30 minutes after game 2, if necessary, on Saturday again, because the super regionals, unlike Division I, though we may see it in the future where they will transition to a 1 game a day format. Right now, it's 1 game on Friday and then potentially 2 games on Saturday. But let's talk a little bit about both teams. The Bull Weevils, they're 35-22. They've been 8-2 in this postseason run, and they've again shared the GAC regular season title, and they won the tournament. All competitive games, and they had to fight in that GAC tournament to get to where they are. Again, it got to the final game in the opening round in the GAC tournament against Oklahoma Baptist. They ended up winning by 1 run, and then they got to the final game against Arkansas Tech, where they ended up winning in a close game as well, to that if necessary game. So they're 35-2. They're led by John Harvey, 14th season at UAM. And again, we mentioned the last time that they got this far was 2016. So again, they're playing UCM. So he's a 376 and 279 record here at UAM. Overall, he has 530 wins. He used to coach at Henderson State. And then we have UCM, the 1 seed, again, a perennial power here in the Central region. This team you see here quite often. They're not just in super regional format. Obviously, they haven't been in the super regional since 2019, but a team you see in the postseason quite a bit. They've won 50 games already this season, and they're 7-2 in there so far this postseason. They're the MIAA regular season champions as the 1 seed. Kyle Crooks, he is in his 12th season at UCM, his 10th as the head coach, and he has a pretty good record as he's 396 and 131, a 751 win percentage, and that's 4th highest amongst active D2 coaches in terms of winning percentages. As you can see here, under Harvey's tenure, this is their 5th regional appearance. They got to the regional final in 2016. This is under Crook's tenure, their 8th appearance in 10 years, and they've had 3 World Series appearances. The last one was in 2021, where they were the runner-up that season as well. And if you have World Series titles, we have, very interestingly, UCM has 2 World Series titles, and those came from now current head coaches at different programs, names you might have heard of. Dave Van Horn, who is currently the head coach at Arkansas. He was the head coach behind the Mules in 1994 that won it all, while Emporia State head coach Brad Hill, who's currently at another MIAA school at Emporia State, he led UCM to win it all in 2003. And UCM, you can see here, they quite an offense as a team. First in batting average 360 in the country, second in OBP at 458, first in slugging at 647, first in OPS at 1,105. They're first in home runs. They're actually 10 home runs away from the all-time Division II record, which was tied by Quincy last year at 131 there last year. So they're 10 away. They're also lead the country in fielding percentage at 982. So a team that can get the job done there. And now we'll continue down and talk about some key players. And yeah, I just can't talk about the Mules without talking about Brennan Van Bruseggen, who's a first-team All-Central Region and the MIAA Player of the Year. And the stats kind of speak for themselves. The guy who's hitting 380, OBP of 478, slugging 810. Yes, 810. That's not an OPS. That's just slugging. Whereas OPS is 1288. He has 21 home runs and 68 RBI with 18 of 26 there in stolen bases. Another guy is Carter Young. He's a first-team All-Central Region selection. He hit 377, OBP 41, slugging 720, 16 home runs, 61 RBI, and 29 of 35 in stolen bases. A team that likes to run the base paths there as well. Josh Patrick was a second-team All-Central Region. He hit 364 and OPS over 1,100 with 11 home runs and 42 RBI. Other guys we'd like to mention, Chase Heath, who's hitting 393, and Max Foley, who's hitting 376. Well, on the flip side, we have a couple good pitchers we want to talk about. And we're excited for this Game 1 matchup because it'll be a matchup of Connors. But first, we'll talk about the Central Region and MIAA Pitcher of the Year, Connor Wolf, who's 11-0 in 85 2/3 innings, 80 strikeouts to 15 walks, a 4.2 ERA, and a 1.06 WHIP. Really impressive there, as he's going to toe the rubber there in Game 1 and be a tough guy to beat because, well, he hasn't been beaten all season. So another guy who's really turned it on, especially recently, is Jack Creasman. He threw 7 2/3 and only gave up a few runs against Augustana in the regional. And he's 6-1 in 61 1/3 innings, a 4.11 ERA, 1.37 WHIP, 49 strikeouts. So another guy that's going to get the ball probably in Game 2, and a guy who, again, has turned it on recently. Has been a key point for this Mules pitching staff. You obviously can't talk about the Mules without talking about their stopper, a guy who was the first-team All-Region last year in J.D. McReynolds, who went 8-1. He's had 20 appearances. He's thrown 24 1/3 innings, and he struck out 44 batters. So really strong out of the bullpen there. With how he's been, with a 3.33 ERA as well. So a lot of key players there for Central Missouri as we now flip over to Arkansas Monticello, some key players there. And Will mentioned it earlier, a freshman. We got to talk about Camden Tanner, who's a first-team All-Central Region and the Great American Conference Freshman of the Year. He's hitting 422. Yes, 422. OBP of 518, slugging 696. He has an OPS of 1214. He has 13 home runs and 49 driven in. Another guy who's really turned it on here in the regional. He went 7 of 10 in the regional at Missouri Southern. Kirk Wolf hitting 333, OBP of 437 or 477, slugging 637, OPS over 1,100, 11 home runs, 48 RBI. And then a guy that's really good defensively is Chaz Poppy. He's an all GAC defensive team. He's hitting 313 and OBP of 336, slugging 561, 15 home runs and 61 RBI. And speaking of defense, Arkansas Monticello, in terms of defensive efficiency ratio, which is just a measure of how many balls in play are converted into outs, they're third in the country, actually first among all postseason teams, or excuse me, all super regional teams, with a 71.8% figure, which means, every time there's a ball in play, almost 72% of the time, Arkansas Monticello is able to convert that into an out, and that's what you want, defensively, and especially for the staff, which we'll talk about here, which is Connor Irvine, a first-team All-Great American Conference selection. He's 9-1, and he's thrown 95 2/3 innings. Again, that Connor versus Connor matchup. He has a 4.23 ERA, 88 strikeouts to 33 walks. Opponents are hitting only 250 against him with a 1.3 WHIP. And another guy we'd like to talk about starter wise, Charles Peacock. He's 3-4, 69 innings. He does have a 5.87 ERA, but he has 95 strikeouts in 69 innings. So he is very adept to getting the strikeout, and the batting average against a paltry 227 as well. So we'll see if Peacock can limit to walks against the Central Missouri team and perform well. But a guy who's been performing well all postseason has only given up 1 run in his 6 appearances, and that's Nelson Mercado. An honorable mention All GAC, 4-3 in 25 appearances. He has a 3.48 ERA in 44 innings, 55 strikeouts, 18 walks, a 1.07 WHIP, and batters are just hitting 182 against him. So this will be a very exciting matchup. I know you see the stalwart in Central Missouri, but you never know with Arkansas and Monticello. The Bull Weevils have definitely gotten it done quite a bit this season, and who's to say they can't get it done again? But Will, before we talk about our picks, talk about a few things you're excited about here in this Central Super Regional.
For sure. I mean, with Central Missouri getting the opportunity to play in their own barn, that is a big factor here. I think the game 1 matchup is as good as it gets with Connor Wolf and Connor Irvine, like you mentioned. Central Missouri, they've got a little bit more thump in their offense, but you're right. The Bull Weevils, as of late, have been playing great baseball. They struggled a little bit early in the year, but finished strong and have put that hot baseball action, the way they've played, the good quality ball down the stretch to clinch a share of a GAC regular season title, win the tournament, then ultimately go to the regional with 3 GAC teams, 2 of them, the other 2 they tied with in a 3-way tie atop the standings and get out of it. With Missouri Southern being the host, now they pay a visit to another MIAA school. Certainly going to be a challenge. You mentioned the historic offensive numbers that Kyle Crooks' bunch has put up, and I think that that's going to be hard to slow down. No question about it. Camden Tanner, he's turned into a Division II baseball superstar. Really looking forward to seeing what he can do during this series. Obviously, Central Missouri approaching history to try to be one of the most prolific home run hitting teams of all time, especially in this era. Man, it's so impressive. And I think that it makes you really excited about what's going to happen. Obviously, McReynolds at the back end of the pen, one of the top closers and just stoppers in the country. You look at opponents getting nothing off him, a sub 160 batting average against, nothing to scoff at. He's a guy you could see him try to close out every game. I mean, he is so dang impressive. 159 against. I mean, in 20 appearances, he has really just shut the door in these high leverage spots. They're going to rely upon him quite a bit. But you got 5, 6, 7 studs on this Central Missouri lineup, and I think that they do have a little bit more juice, but that's not always what it's about this time of the year. It's about a lot of factors and playing good, clean, quality baseball. And really, Robert, you mentioned UAM and their ability to play defense. Central Missouri is fielding percentage-wise the best team in the country, right? So you got 2 great defensive teams as well, and I think that it's going to be a really just highly competitive, close series. Central Missouri, obviously, the standard has been set for them. It's kind of carry or bust every year for them, but these Bull Weevils have shown the ability to make things difficult. And I think that you're going to see 2 well-pitched games in game 1 and just well-defended series all throughout with 2 of the best defensive teams in the country.
Absolutely, Will. And, I'm excited to see this matchup. Ultimately, I think it'll come down to 3 games. I think UAM will push it to a 3rd game, but it's hard to go against UCM and their pedigree and how good they've been this season. So give me UCM in 3.
I'm going to agree with you on this one as well. I'm going to pick Central Missouri. I think this likely is another 3-game or 2. To go with Central Missouri, it feels like a safe pick, but man, I think 3, and I think all 3 games are going to be pretty thrilling at that. But I'm going to go with Central Missouri as well, with what they have on the mound now, with their game 1 and 2, feeling pretty confident about it. with finally getting to exercise some of those demons after being eliminated by Augustana and taking it to them twice. This group is confident. This group feels good. And I think that whoever comes to Warrensburg, whoever it was going to be, I think that they were going to be the pick for me, and they are in this occasion as well.
Absolutely. As now we transition on to the East region, and we got a lot of talk about there. Very exciting 1-versus-2 matchup against two top teams that you typically see a lot here in the East region finals.
You do indeed. I mean, these two teams met in the 2022 Supers. When you look at Southern New Hampshire, they won that in 3 games. And for Southern New Hampshire, the program that they've put together, bar none, I mean, it's just one of the most dominant programs within their particular region in the country. I mean, they've gone to the World Series each of the last 3 seasons and 4 of the last 5. So for Molloy to pay a visit to Southern New Hampshire for an East Super Regional matchup, number 1 versus number 2, it's one of the most intriguing matchups, I think, because you have the pedigree of Southern New Hampshire, but you have Molloy, who there's a lot to write home about with this team right now, especially when they make that great run in the ECC tournament. They go undefeated in their pod. They're 6-0 currently in the postseason with 42-12 record. They feel confident, and they've got a lot to like right now. Joe Fucarino, in 19 seasons at the helm, 1 game shy of getting 500 wins under his belt. I would expect him to get one here this week, and I think at least they're going to get a game. And you got Chris Shank, who, great story with him. He obviously served as an interim coach here for some time, then went to coach at New England College in Eastern Nazarene before coming back. In his first year at the helm, he's got them in a position to defend what has been a 3-time defending East Region title for Southern New Hampshire, really been the kings of the New England area when it comes to Division II baseball. So Molloy, 2nd time in 3 seasons here. Southern New Hampshire, again, 4 of the last 5 years. They've gone to the World Series. But, man, let's get into it. Let's talk about some of these players because there's a lot to talk about. Let's start first with Molloy. They've got the East Region Player of the Year, and Anthony Manacero hit .426 this year with 55 runs driven in. But they also have the East Region Pitcher of the Year, and I don't know if anybody's throwing the ball as well as Molloy right now in the country. Charlie Cucchiera, 11-1 with a 2.9 ERA. Then you got J.C. Kiss, who went 8-2. Is 8-2 this year with a 2.5, but you look at how they have thrown the ball as of late. All 3 of their starters in their regional pod, Robert, went the distance through complete games, and that is a really impressive thing. You saw Kiss, he retired 23 straight guys to finish his excellent outing, and Cucchiera, just a great arm as well. So that's one of the best. I'm not going to say the best because Tampa's got Canny and Gonzalez, but certainly one of the best 1-2 punches in the country. And that's why Molloy is certainly a team that you have to look at, even with a 3-time defending champ in Southern New Hampshire. And they certainly have a strong offense. When you look at some of their guys, Jorge Burgos has been great this year. You got 2 of the best second basemen going at it in this regional with Jorge Burgos of Southern New Hampshire. And then you got Gavin McAloney, who's been great this postseason. He is hitting .341. You got 2 great second basemen. And you got Harry Vargas Segura, fantastic in the outfield. He can swipe bags. Frankie DeMauro can do it on both sides. Nader Watcher, a freshman who's 2nd-team all-region outfielder. He's been fantastic. And then for Molloy, J.J. DeVito, he can rake. Matt Yip has been just being clutch this season. And so I'm really intrigued about some of the guys offensively. But when you look at the pitching matchups, it's going to be Charlie Cucchiera, J.C. Kiss against Parker Lendrum, probably game 1, Austin Trumpor, probably game 2. And you've got a couple of all-region starters and just 4 really good starters guaranteed that you're probably going to see in those first 2 games. DeMauro's also been pretty impressive. And then Reisdorf's been good for them out of the bullpen. But, man, I'm excited about these pitching matchups for sure. Trumpor, Lendrum, Cucchiera, Kiss. I mean, sign me up for some good East Region action because that's what you're going to see between these 2 teams, especially you put on the fact that these 2 teams met just a couple of years ago in this round. It went 3 games. I expect it to go that far again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 2 really good pitching staffs. You know, you have Lendrum, you have Trumpor, DeMauro game 3. On the flip side, Cucchiera 1. J.C. Kiss game 2 and Ryan Hines, who threw the game 3 complete game there in the regional advance to the Supers. Exciting to see that. What I'm more excited about is which offense is able to produce more runs, because by the looks of it, on paper, it looks like we're going to have some very close, tight pitching games. So we might see a lot of small ball played and a lot of who can get the big hit. And I mean, when you look at both of these teams, both teams have guys who can get the job done. But at the end of the day, I think with what Malloy has offensively, you see it here. Manacero, Yip, DeVito, Gavin McAloney. DeVito is a guy who can steal a lot of base. He has almost 30 stolen bases on the season too. Manacero, the East Region Player of the Year. Matt Yip, who's hitting 373, can hit some home runs there, has some extra base hit pie. I know they're going on the road, but I think when you balance out these two pitching staffs, you have Malloy as the better defensive team as well, and the slightly better, or I should say the better offense. I would take Malloy here in 3 games.
Yeah, I'm going to take Malloy too. Charlie Cucchiera and J.C. Kiss is a lot to deal with, and I think that they're going to be able to slow down Southern New Hampshire, even in an adverse environment, even having this team who has played a lot at home, even in the postseason. I think that ultimately they're going to get the job done and punch a ticket to Cary, North Carolina, because of how strong. I mean, they didn't even have to go to the bullpen in their regional, and I think that's going to bode well for them here in the Supers also. And I'm going with the Lions of Malloy as well.
And speaking of as well, we have a Saginaw Valley and UIndy Midwest Super Regional. UIndy back-to-back years there in the Super Regional. Saginaw Valley, they have the most wins in program history. This is their first ever Super Regional, as Saginaw Valley at 41 wins. Really excited to see it here. And very interestingly, both teams were 5-3 in the postseason when you account for the GLIAC tournament and the regional number 1. And this will be very exciting. Will, give us some of your thoughts on what you expect to see here.
Absolutely. When you look at Saginaw Valley and the Cardinals, they've got a great story, great program. Adam Petrovics, man, what has he done in 2 years to put this program number 1 seed in the Midwest and program record-setting year? Interestingly enough, for Saginaw Valley, the first time they ever made a regional, they actually ended up playing UIndy that back in the 1990s. And the last time these two teams played, it was back in 2016. They met twice in March, and they split those matchups. So the first time these two teams, albeit both Midwest region teams, haven't met since 2016. And again, did play once in the postseason despite being quite some time ago. And it's going to be at University Center, Michigan. And it's going to be at SVSU, GLVC versus GLIAC. UIndy 39-19, 29-7. They're the GLVC regular season champs. Saginaw, the GLIAC regular season champs, got all the way to the GLIAC title game, ultimately fell. Both of these teams showed back up against the wall ability as well in their particular regional pods. UIndy winning those elimination games, 4 of them, to ultimately put themselves in a position to be in the Super Regionals for the second consecutive year. So shout out to Al Reddy, a former standout at UIndy, then assistant coach, and now head coach, a chance to send him back to Cary for a second consecutive season, while Saginaw trying to go there for a first time. So it should be fun, but let's get into some of the players, because there's some really good ones here in this Midwest Regional, Super Regional. And the first guy, it's Hayden Yachek. We've talked about him all year long, and we're going to talk about him again. He's hitting .466, 15 home runs. He was the Midwest Region Player of the Year, first-team DH. He's also 6-0 on the mound through 11 starts. Opponents just hitting .196 off him, and Perfect Game announced him as the D2 Baseball Player of the Year. I'd have to agree with him. Colin Cornwell, though, he was a first-team All-Region outfielder. He's hitting .380. Reed Raymond's hitting .397. They've got bats, and so does UIndy. I think that you're going to see some runs, even though you've got Hayden Yachek and Chase Raymond, 2 really good pitchers. And on the other side, you got Diego Cardenas of UIndy. I think that you're going to see a lot of runs. Both teams are hitting above 300 as a squad. When you look at UIndy, it's the transfer from S&T Cole Hampton who's led this offense this year. He's hitting .320 with 9 homers. You got Caleb Vaughn. You have Easton Good. You have Zach Williams getting on base a ton, and Drew Donaldson, who's a really good player as well, an All-American from a season ago, who has a 360 batting average. E.J. White's been a huge stopper for them. That sidewinder who can throw any game, it feels like. In 29 appearances for him, he's been able to shut the door quite a bit, a ton of saves. He's 5-3, and he has been a really impressive back-end guy. He's going to factor into the series quite a bit. But, man, a lot. I think this is the most even matchup in any of the regions. It really feels like a toss-up because both offenses are good. Both teams have horses at the front end, and I think that it's going to be a lot of fun to watch with both of these groups and the stories that surround both of these particular programs.
Yeah, and very exciting to see the different styles of offense both of these teams play. You know, like UIndy, more of a team that will play you with small ball and try to move runners over and then use their speed to advance bases as well. And it helps when they hit extra bases, as you can see quite a bit there. You know, Cole Hampton and Easton Good are two guys that can hit for a lot of extra bases. So makes for hitting a double in the gap with a runner at first a lot easier to score that run. Whereas Saginaw Valley, they do have those elements, but they're more of a, you know, power hitting team. And so it'll be very interesting to see, you know, if this game is close. I think it might go in UIndy's favor, especially with how well they can play that small ball type of game, especially with, you know, what they have in the back end of the bullpen. I know Saginaw, they have Tyler McLaren as their one, Hayden Yachek, you know, a guy who can do it on both sides of the ball. He will presumably throw game 2. And if it were to go to game 3, Chase Raymond as well. So very excited to see those matchups too, and very excited to see just how tightly knit these two teams are, like Will mentioned. But at the end of the day, I think the team that is hosting this super regional there in University Center, Michigan, will ultimately come out ahead, and that's the Saginaw Valley State Cardinals. And I think they will be the team that punches their ticket to carry North Carolina. Will, what do you think?
I'm going to go with UIndy on this one. I think their experience from a season ago certainly helps being in a super regional. Got burned obviously last week. I think that there is a lot to be said when Saginaw can go beat a Northwood and go beat a Ashland team in their own pod to ultimately move on. They showed that grit. They showed that comeback ability. They showed that let's hang on to it ability when Northwood was coming back against them. And I think that that's why I find this as a toss-up. Saginaw, I would think, has a little bit more depth in the starting pitching department. Diego Cardenas is great. I think another layer to this, and I still am picking UIndy. I think that offensively they're a little bit more dynamic despite, you know, you got Yachek and you got Cornwell and Raymond, all guys you have to worry about. And when both teams are hitting above 310, I mean, these offenses, there's no, you need to be able to compete at a really high level. And also with Diego, they used him a lot in that regional pod. That was one that was an interesting regional that required them to move from Bill Bright to Indiana to then cancel a day, move it back to a Monday. So he threw twice in that regional pod. You almost wonder when Al Reddy's going to use him, right? He's your best arm. You have to throw. You wonder, though, perhaps do they give him another day, and does he throw with the season on the line on Saturday? Because it's going to be on the line whether they win or lose. I wonder if they wait to throw him that day and see. But they've got a lot of guys. They got experienced guys on the back end, like Bestool, another arm out of that back end of the pen that has shown the ability to be dynamic. So I'm going to go with UIndy because I think that they have a lot of things going for them at their disposal. And I think that offensively, there's less breaks in their lineup. Now, there's probably more stars in the lineup for Saginaw Valley, but there's less breaks in that UIndy lineup. And I think that they're going to be able to produce enough runs and limit enough runs to ultimately come out on top. But I certainly expect this one to go down to a game 3. And I'm really excited to see a Hayden Yachek go up against this offense. A Raymond, a McLaurin, who was so great last year, struggled a little bit this year, go up against a dynamic UIndy offense. I'm really interested to see when Diego throws, obviously, because he threw game 1 and the last game of that thrilling regional Midwest region pod number 2. I think that is a factor you have to talk about here. And I think that for UIndy, that doesn't really, phase them if they don't have their guy go game one, if that's the case, because that happened a season ago they were able to win it on Saturday after winning both and beating Quincy and ultimately doing it on the road. They've done that before. And I think that they have an opportunity to punch a ticket to Cary. They have the opportunity to play with their backs up against the wall like they did in Midwest Region pot number 2 when they won a ton of elimination games. And they really were a team coming into the season didn't know where to rank them, right? Because they had that run and they kind of got hot. Oh, they got hot at the right time. They made it to Cary, which is incredible accomplishment. But coming into this year, it was like, what are we going to think of this UIndy team? How good are they? And I'll speak for myself, and I think both of us, like, we had some question marks, like, hey, how are they going to replicate what they did at the end of the season? And credit to them, because they bring in a couple transfers from Missouri S&T who fortify that lineup, and all throughout they've had some guys continue to step up and play bigger roles this season, and it's got themselves in a position a couple ways from a wins away from Cary again. And I think that they're ultimately going to get the job done. Long-winded answer, but I'm going to rival your pick and go with UIndy on this one, in what should be a thrilling series.
It should be a thrilling series, like you mentioned. It's even either way, and yeah, like going now to UIndy again, mentioning them again with Cardenas, throwing Thursday, then 3 days of rest, throwing again Monday. Will he have 3 days of rest to throw again Friday, or will he have a 4th day of rest throwing again Saturday? And now this is a little bit different compared to the pro level, because again, you typically have 4 days of rest. But at the college level, you're looking around 6 days of rest because of how the schedules work out. You're playing basically Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so you're throwing once on the weekend. So this will be extra short rest, if you will, for Cardenas if he throws back-to-back. But again, either way, like Will mentioned, it doesn't seem like they'll be phased, but still creating a very intriguing series as we head over to the South region. And this is an all Sunshine State Conference super regional between Tampa and Embry-Riddle. These two teams have played 31 times. Tampa is 20-11. They did play a 3-game set against each other at Embry-Riddle. And Embry-Riddle was able to win one of those games, but Tampa ultimately took the series there. And this is the first time they'll play in the postseason. Embry-Riddle's relatively new to be able to get into the postseason, as they were an NAIA program not too long ago. And, of course, this is with the top overall seed, you would presume. Tampa, it's at the Birdcage, best of 3. First game is Friday, May 24th at 6 p.m. Eastern, and you have that Saturday doubleheader if necessary. Tampa has won 8 of the last 9 games against Embry-Riddle. Again, that one loss mentioned earlier this season is both of these teams have very different stories. Tampa starting off strong, winning their first 19 games before ultimately dropping their first one to Seton Hill. And they have just been a team at the top the entire season long, while Embry-Riddle, you didn't know what to expect from them. And they had a stretch where they played Rollins, they played Tampa, they played St. Leo all in back-to-back-to-back weekends. And they were able to get out of it with a 4-5 record. And yes, that's a losing record, but against teams of that caliber, it really makes for opportunities for teams to play better there. And their metrics showed, and they ultimately got the 3 seed. Now, much to the chagrin of some fans who thought that was too high for them, they ultimately went into that regional in St. Leo and went 3-1, and they ultimately beat West Florida in a very high-scoring game, scoring 16 runs to beat them in that if-necessary game to advance the Super. So they've shown that they can get the job done. And speaking of getting the job done, I want to go talk about some of the coaches there too. Randy Stiegel is in his 16th season. He's 550 and 319 as well. This is his second D2 regional appearance since Embry-Riddle was NAIA not too long ago. They've had 8 appearances in the NAIA tournament, including 7 World Series appearances under his tenure. So they were an NAIA all the way up until 2015, and really excited to see that success there. And then you have, speaking of success, you have probably the penultimate person of success at the Division II level, and that's Joe Urso. He's the South Region Coach of the Year. His 24th season at Tampa. He's won over 1,000 games. And if you can read that right, yes, he's won almost 78% of his games as a head coach. That's the highest win percentage amongst active D2 coaches right now. And they've appeared in the regional every single year under Urso's tenure, obviously not counting COVID because that didn't exist. And they've won 5 national championships together. 2006, 2007, 2013, 2015, and 2019 is their most recent one with the Spartans. So this program is not akin to, or I should say is akin to having success and reaching the highest level. As in all, they have 8 total World Series titles. They've won 3 more, 1992, 1993, and 1998. So very interesting to see there. Tampa, and they have a 309 team ERA, which is best in Division II. They also have, in terms of fielding percentage, a top 10 fielding percentage at 975. They get on base at such a high level as well. They're 7th in the country with a 448 OBP there. But we'll talk a little bit about players. EJ Cumbo, who's the all-time hits leader in his 7th year of college baseball, the Sunshine State Conference Player of the Year, first team All-South region. He's actually back-to-back Sunshine State Conference Player of the Year, hitting 393, 451, 647, 11 home runs, 61 RBIs. Another guy we'd like to highlight is Santiago Garavito, the catcher. He's hitting 320. He was a first-team All-South region, OPS over 1,000, also with 11 home runs. And then Will mentioned it earlier, but I'd like to talk about probably the best 1-2 punch you'll ever see in Division II baseball, and that's Alex Canny and Skyler Gonzalez. Alex Canny was a first-team All-South region. He was the 2023 Sunshine State Conference Pitcher of the Year. And then his teammate, the guy who throws behind him, Skyler Gonzalez, he was the South Region and Sunshine State Conference Pitcher of the Year this year. Between the two, they are 26-2, and they've thrown over 180 innings between the two. ERA both under 2.5, Canny at 2.45. Gonzalez at 2.29. Canny has 83 strikeouts to 14 walks, and Gonzalez has a 61 strikeouts, 70 walks. Both have batting average against under 250, and both have a whip right around 1.06 or 1.07. So when you want to talk about probably the best 1-2 punch in terms of starting pitchers, this is it with these two guys. But on the flip side, you have Embry-Riddle. You have 2 guys that are really good offensively, and a very good double play tandem there in Chase Bruno and Camden Traficante, both second-team All-South region selections. Bruno, 379, 448, 453, a guy who gets on base at such a high level. Camden Traficante hits for a little bit more pop. He's hitting 318, 444, and slugging 521, 6 home runs, and 53 RBI. And then on the pitching side, like we mentioned with UIndy earlier with Cardenas, Dylan Moran was a guy that threw a bunch in the regional to get to this point. So he started on Thursday, threw, I believe, 8 innings, and then came out of the bullpen and threw 4 innings on Sunday to help get that win. As now it'll be determined, does Moran need an extra day of rest, or will he throw Friday? He's 9-3 in 97 2/3 innings. A 3.5 ERA has 108 strikeouts to 26 walks with a whip of 1.12 and a batting average of 2.21. And then another guy is out of the bullpen has been Max Meyer. He's been basically nails out of their bullpen. Their stopper. He'll come in at any point in the game to basically put the fire out and then potentially close out that game. In 23 appearances, he's thrown 62 1/3 innings. He's 8-2 with a 3.18 ERA, 60 strikeouts to 28 walks, a batting average against of 2.19, and a whip of 1.25. So I know it's cliche to say, but a David versus Goliath matchup, this is kind of what you're seeing here. You know what to expect from Tampa, but can a team like Embry-Riddle knock them off?
It'll be tough, but there is something to be said about Embry-Riddle and their resilience to compete at such a high level in the Sunshine State Conference behind Tampa and St. Leo, who are 2 top 10 teams all year long, and for them to be that third team of the mix and third team of the mix of course, because you're the third team in the SSC, well, you're probably going to be the third team in the South region. And that's what they were. And I think you painted the picture at a really high level, right? Tampa has been the team everybody's been chasing, and everybody's been trying to chase for quite some time in the landscape of Division II baseball. Joe Urso, in 24 years, he's every single time they've held an NCAA tournament under his direction, he's been there. That's why he is, win percentage wise, the best coach in the country, and national title wise, the best coach in the country. He knows how to get the job done. I think that what Alex Canny and Skylar Gonzalez has done this year, it creates a little project for us, Robert. I think we need to look and see at some point, has there ever been, and if you guys know of one, like, let us know, because this is literally a question of curiosity. But has there ever been this dominant of a 1-2 punch, really, in college baseball, and particularly, of course, focusing on what we cover, Division II baseball? I wonder, I would love to see some of the great all-time 1-2 punches, because this is what it is. When both guys are sub 2.5, both guys are 90 plus innings. I mean, that's such a great sample size of work. It shows that they're workhorses. They each started 16 ball games every single week. They're going out there, and it almost guarantees you a series win, right? Because both of those guys, and they're sweeping most of the time. I mean, they're the number one team in the country, but with those guys, man, it is hard to pick against them. So I'm going to go with Tampa. And I think that when you look at it, it's going to be competitive. I mean, Embry-Riddle was able to get a game from Tampa. They had that stretch of Tampa St. Leo Rollins where they were able to kind of get through it, getting a game each from those two top teams in the SSC. Despite losing the series, it showed what this group is all about. Dylan Moran is going to cause problems. I mean, he's nearly thrown 100 innings this year. He's been great. And I think that he's obviously somebody that, with the challenge of going up against a Tampa lineup that he's already seen, he certainly is going to be somebody that you expect to throw the ball well and make that first game very competitive, or like you mentioned, whenever he throws a competitive ball game. But there's no breaks in Tampa's pitching staff. They're the best in the country. The numbers say it with their ERA. EJ Cumbo, man, 7th year of college baseball. You see some record-setting stuff with this group. You've probably got the National Pitcher of the Year on this team, and then you certainly got a guy who probably could be runner-up. And then you also have EJ Cumbo, who, yeah, maybe not the National Player of the Year, but, I mean, one of the greatest D2 players of all time when you look at the counting numbers that he has, the most ever hits, and one of the best Sunshine State players ever, the only player ever to be back-to-back and 2-time Sunshine State Player of the Year award winner in one of the most highly regarded conferences in college baseball. But if you like good pitching matchups, you'll definitely see some during this series. Chase Bruno's been a lot to deal with what he's been able to do this year, one of the best hitters in the Sunshine State Conference. I think it's going to be a fun series. Embry-Riddle's been a fun team to talk about. They've been a team that you can't shy away from when you couldn't ignore what they were doing this year in Sunshine State Conference play. But I'm going to go with Tampa, like I've mentioned before. But again, you guys need to check this one out. And just to watch a broadcast of Tampa versus Embry-Riddle in a super regional at Tampa, it's a sight to be seen. I mean, you got some great facilities this week. You got one in San Diego we'll talk about a little bit later. You certainly got one here in Tampa, probably not just the best team in the country, but certainly Joe Urso's club plays at one of the best facilities around as well. And I think that they're going to punch a ticket to Cary this weekend.
Yeah, Will, I have to agree with you. And I mean, here's another interesting tidbit, because this is kind of like rarefied air there with EJ Cumbo. So in 2019, he was a member of the New York Institute of Technology, the NYIT team that went to Cary and played in 2019 under the direction of former major leaguer Frank Catalanato. However, with that 2020 COVID, that program shut down. So Cumbo had to transfer somewhere. He ultimately transferred to Tampa. So he could be one of the few players to go to Cary, North Carolina for 2 different teams. And again, rarefied air there, but I'm with you there. I think Tampa, they're not carrier bus like Central Missouri you mentioned earlier. They're national championship or bus. So I think the expectation is for them to get to carry and to try to win the whole thing. So I'm going with Tampa as now. We go to the Southeast region, and man, that was an exciting regional on both ends. Georgia College really surprised as the 7th seed and ran the table there in the Southeast Regional, beating North Greenville, beating Mount Olive, then beating them again to advance here to the Supers. And Catawba played in one of the most exciting regionals in terms of winning percentages because all three teams had going into the regional had 39 or more wins and were able to, after losing their first game to Young Harris, was able to beat UNCP and then beat Young Harris in the title game to advance here. A lot of winning there, as you know, Catawba's 42-15, they're 4-3, but Georgia College, man, the 7th seed, they swept the Peach Belt tournament there in the first, I guess, the 4-team bracket that they hosted. Then they hosted the best of 3 and beat Flagler there on a walk-off by Matthew McBain. As, you know, it's played at Salisbury, North Carolina at Newman Park. 8-0 record, 37-20 overall. And, well, they've only played each other 3 times, and all 3 of those times have been in regionals at neutral site. And the last time they played was May 15th, 2015, where it was an elimination game, and Catawba ended up winning that one 9-2, which ultimately ended Georgia College's season there. So a long time ago that these two teams played. Now they're playing again with a trip to Cary on the line. And, well, we actually have kind of an experienced coach versus a somewhat inexperienced coach, and when you compare the two. But Nolan Belcher in his 4th season at Georgia College, he's 112-82, while Jim Gant, he's been at Catawba for 28 years, 986 and 499. He won't get to 1,000 wins this season, but if he were to return for a 29th season, he would for sure likely get that. But really excited to see here. You know, this is Georgia College's first appearance in the regionals under, I should say, postseason appearance under Belcher. They went 5 times from 2013 to 2018, so they're no slouch as a program to get to the postseason, as they had a little bit of a stint where they didn't, but now they're back in it. And then Catawba, it's their 14th appearance in a postseason under Gant. It's their first since 2021. And, well, they've been to the World Series twice, especially in the last 10 years, 2015 and 2019. And, matter of fact, in that 2015 season, they were the national runner-up. So they've gotten to the final game of the season, ultimately losing, but they've gotten there. And Georgia College, the last time they made it to the World Series was 1995 there as well. So, and then some interesting facts there. Catawba is 131 and 156 in stolen bases of the team. Really high ranks there. They're a team that likes to steal bases. As talk a little bit about their guys here. Levi Perrell, a 2nd-team All-Southeast region, hitting 376 with an OPS over 1,000. He's 22-28 for stolen bases. You got Dylan Driver, who has an OPS over 1,000, 6 home runs, and 46 RBI, 17-19 for stolen bases. And we know Newman Park plays a little bit pitcher-friendly, so playing that small ball, getting those extra bases with stolen bases and whatnot will play well here in the postseason, you know, being able to host there as well. And then you got 2 really good starters for Catawba with Payne Stolesworth, who was the first-team All-Southeast region and the South Atlantic Conference Pitcher of the Year. He's 10-3, 97 innings, and that's the theme you'll see between Stolesworth and Fine. A lot of innings between these two guys, so would not be surprised if both of those guys go deep into their starts. Stolesworth has a 3.8 ERA, 77 strikeouts, a 1.22 whip. Hitters are hitting 260 against him for Fine. He's 8-3, 4.18 ERA, 70 strikeouts, 27 walks, a 239 batting average against, and a 1.19 whip. So very interesting to see here for Catawba, you know, what their advantage is stealing those bases and then allowing that pitching and defense to get the job done there. As now we talk about on the flip side with Georgia College, Gabriel Worth, who was a first-team All-Southeast region as a utility player, he's hitting 362, 416 OVP, 3 home runs, 37 RBI. And then Matthew Mebane was really turned it on this postseason. 322, 409, 644. He was the second team All Southeast region. 20 home runs, and he's hit, I believe, 5 since the Peach Belt tournament. So he's really turned it on there, including his 3 home run game in that bracket semifinal against Mount Olive. And then Brandon Bellflower, a guy who can hit a ton of doubles. He has over 20 on the season. 374, 489, 608, 10 home runs, 43 RBI. And then we obviously got to talk about a guy like John Luke Glanton. Oh, if you want to talk about workhorses, this is it. This is the guy of workhorses. He's thrown 114 innings in 16 appearances. No pitcher has thrown more among super regional teams than he has this season. He's 11-4. He shut the door there against North Greenville, which was very impressive there. And, well, it's pretty impressive to have a 2.45 ERA and a 2.37 batting average against a 1.09 whip as well. So he's the likely game 1 starter who will go up against Stolzworth. So a very exciting matchup. Then out of the bullpen, you have a guy by the name of Lex Kenny, who's 4-2 and 21 appearances, 2 starts, 54 2/3 innings, a 3.62 ERA, batting average against a 2.62, a 1.39 whip. He was a second team All Peach Belt Conference selection, and he will definitely make a few. He may appear in every game there in the postseason, if not at least the first 2. But very excited to see both of these teams' matchups. Again, I don't know if you would say a David versus Goliath, but a team that Georgia College, they wouldn't have gotten in unless they won the Peach Belt tournament. They ultimately did, and now here they are, 2 wins away from Cary, North Carolina.
Yeah, and they did it on something that is going to be talked about for a long time, a walk-off home run from none other than Matthew Mebane, who, Robert, you when you pulled all the numbers from guys performing in the postseason, correct me if I'm wrong, but Matthew Mebane was toward the top of that list in terms of the way that he swung the bat. He has been hot. He has led this offense, and it's going to be interesting because Worth, Mebane, and Bellflower, they've got some juice. And Georgia College was a team that we talked about throughout this year. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that, yeah, if they're in another regional, they're not stealing a bid. I mean, they stole a bid this year, but they're that good of a team that in some of the weaker regions, I think that this is a team that probably gets at large looks. And maybe in other years they would, but they had to win the Peach Belt tournament. They did in what was a great conference, but really the Southeast region, you talk about the winners, 2 of the last 3 out of the national title winners have come from this region. You have really good teams year in and year out, and this is as good as we've seen the Southeast region in recent memory, with all the great teams that performed and actually got into the regional. And let's be honest, the teams that didn't get in, just that's how good this region was. And a lot of top 25 teams that ultimately miss out and don't get to go to a super, but Georgia College is one of them. And they're a team with John Luke Glanton. You have to look at them having a good shot to ultimately win a game, ride that hot hand. You go into Tigerville, Robert, and win 3 games, I think you're doing something right. And Georgia College is certainly doing something right now. But on the other side, when you go up and play Catawba, that's going to be a tough thing. Austin Fine, Payne Stolzworth, that's a punch that's pretty impressive. Both of them have thrown nearly 100 innings this year. They're workhorses as well. Jim Gant's got some guys too, and they play so well at home. They really do. Catawba, one of the best home teams in the country, getting to host Georgia College here in this super regional. And with that being said, with their 2 starters being great and their ability at home to play at such a high level under the direction of longtime tenured head coach, nearly 3 decades at the helm, I'm going with Jim Gant's club. I'm picking the Indians of Catawba to move on to Cary.
Hey, and that's a great pick. And, on paper, it looks like it would seem that way too. But, hey, I tell you what, I like the underdog here in this series. Give me Georgia College. They haven't lost in the postseason. I know Catawba's played so well at home, but, man, the advantage here for Georgia College is they have quite a few guys who have had at least 15 or more doubles on this roster. Mebane, Cam McNerney has 19. Gabriel Worth has 14. So I guess 14 or more. Braden Smith has 20. Brandon Bellflower, I mentioned earlier, has 22. And this park is very inviting for doubles. Like you said, it's more a pitcher-friendly park, but in terms of hitting doubles and triples, the advantage goes Georgia College here. And I think having that advantage there will play well into winning in this best of three and going to Cary. So give me the Bobcats from Georgia College representing the Peach Belt there. As now we're going to transition into our second to last region, which is the South Central region. And well, we got an all Lone Star Conference matchup that we're excited to talk about. We're excited to see, but I want to hear your thoughts first on it, Will. What are you looking forward to in this Angelo State Lubbock Christian matchup?
Yeah, it's an all Lone Star matchup. And when you look at the Lone Star during the regular season, you see 4-game sets that are typically high-flying affairs and just great battles. And this season within the Lone Star Conference, it was just a great battle, really, with the top 3 teams in the league. Lubbock Christian, the team that ultimately won their first ever regular season and tournament title. They currently are 8-0 in the postseason and have the longest win streak right now in the entire country. They've won a baker's dozen 13 games in a row. And so that is intriguing. And then Angelo State, who finished 3rd in the Lone Star Conference, the defending national champs, they finished a few games behind West Texas A&M, who got 2nd. I think that when you look at this group, they have the pedigree, they have everything it takes to do what they did again last year. But when we look at this matchup, Friday and Saturday, going to be the matchups. I know it says Friday 3 times there. That is incorrect, and that is my fault. However, when we look at this matchup, appreciate Robert. And we go down to Lubbock, Texas, Hayes Field and Citibank Clubhouse. Angelo played this Lubbock team in the Lone Star title game back in 2021. They split in the regular season. There isn't going to be a split here because unlike the regular season 4-game sets with these teams familiar with each other, it'll be a 3-game best of 3 for a ticket to Cary, North Carolina. Angelo, the 6th seed, probably not what people expected with them winning a national title last year, but quote unquote sneaking in to the South Central region. I think that they were pretty safe no matter what they did, but because those teams were pretty cemented. But to be the 6th seed, to be the last seed like Georgia College and advance at Mesa, that shows a lot about this group. 39-18. They put together another tremendous season under the direction of Kevin Brooks, who started this program himself back in 2005. And then you got Nathan Blackwood, 21st season, 2 of the best coaches in the country. You look at 2+ decades for both coaches. Both win percentages are close to 700. I know that a lot of that for Nathan Blackwood was not at the Division II level, but since they've been here, they've still done great work. And that's pretty cool to see. Let's get into the matchup. Let's get into some of these players as we look at the personnel of these groups. We'll start with Lubbock Christian, and we'll start with really maybe, Robert, the best left side of the infield in the country. Carson Ogilvie, the shortstop, Brevin McCool, the 3rd baseman, who had a great regional, hit for a cycle. Carson Ogilvie, first-team All-American shortstop. He does great work, hit .428 this year with 64 driven in. Also, well, he's toward the top of the country in runs scored. And then you got Jacob Gutierrez as well, a first-team All-Region outfielder. Those 3 in the lineup are so tough, so difficult, and really experienced. They got Ryan Marquardt on the hill. He's 11-1. And he is a guy who was an all-region selection as a starter. And then on the other side for Angelo State, you also got Pullison Abel, who's 4-0 in 21 appearances, a pretty good back-end guy for them. But you look at Angelo, Trip Clark, and Jacob Guerrero have really set the tone once again for this team. 2 who were very important to that national championship team a year ago. And then Dax Daffy. I mean, the stuff for him, 104 strikeouts against 23 walks in 76 innings. That's been great. Caleb Harritz, who's 0-1, but in 22 innings, a 2.41 ERA. He's been really impressive. Opponents just hitting 200 off him. They've got arms. Angelo's got great arms. They probably have more arm talent than Lubbock. And then when you look at Angelo's offense, Trip Clark probably the best player in that South Central region. He's so good. And you got Ogilvy as well. You've got some of the best players. You got two of the best outfielders in Guerrero, Gutierrez. You got Ogilvy, McCool, shortstop, third base. You got the best catcher. I mean, in Trip Clark. I mean, this is going to be, for me, a knockdown, drag-out fight. It's going to be tough with Angelo paying a visit to Lubbock, but I ultimately think that Angelo, with their pitching staff, is certainly going to slow down Lubbock. And I think that when you look at this, Robert, I'm really interested to see how you break it down, because there are really, really, really good players, two coaches that have been there, two teams that have pedigree. This is going to be so much fun to watch in a super regional battle. Who are you picking? Or who? Before who you pick. Tell me, break it down for me a little bit first.
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait to break it down for you a little bit there, Will. I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, this is going to be very exciting to watch. What I'm really looking forward to is, will Carson Ogilvy's perfect stolen base rate end against Trip Clark? Let me run some numbers for you. So far this season, Carson Ogilvy is 25 of 25 in terms of stolen bases. However, Angelo State Trip Clark, he's 7th in the country in terms of caught stealing rate at 37%. So he's thrown out 37% of the runners. That puts him at 7th in the entire Division II. So very excited to see if Carson Ogilvy gets on base. Does he steal second base? And does a guy like Trip Clark throw him out with how successful he's been behind the dish as a catcher there? But this is basically a matchup of what you expect to see in the postseason. One team really good at pitching and defense, Angelo State, there in terms of ERA, best in the Lone Star Conference at 4.77. Or excuse me. No, at 4.77. Just needed to double check that. Plus, they're 13th in the country in fielding percentage at 974. So teams that can really get it done there, especially, coming into the postseason, that's what you need here. But then you have a team on the flip side, maybe not as good defensively and pitching-wise, but offensively, they sure can hit. In terms of on-base plus slugging, Lubbock Christian's third in the country at a 1,038 figure, again, on-base, or OPS is on-base plus slugging, so how well you get on base and how well you hit for extra bases. And you can see some of their top three guys there, how well they do there. So very interesting, at least on paper, and me being a stats guy that I am, the Tide would say, hey, pick Angelo State because they have better pitching and defense metrics. But I'm going to go Lubbock Christian at home with that offense. I think Lubbock Christian will represent the South Central region in Cary. But again, this will be a beat you down, grind it out type 3-game set. Very excited to see, Ryan Marquardt against potentially Braxton Pearson. And then, who's to say what we're going to see in game 2. But I think these two offenses, and especially that West Texas wind, man, I tell you what, if you saw any of that regional balls that didn't look like they were going out, went up. And when Lubbock Christian beat UT Permian Basin twice, they scored over 20 runs in each game. And, once you get the ball in the air, who knows what can happen there. So I think with that being said, I think I'm going to go against the wind there as a little pun there and say Lubbock Christian.
Yeah, I mean, Lubbock, it's hard to pick against Lubbock. Number 1 seed, hosting 13 wins in a row. Marquardt's good for him, but yeah, you mentioned Pearson, Dax. I mean, they got some arms at Angelo. When these two teams played in the regular season, it was at Angelo. 4-game set, the two teams split. And Lubbock, the 2 games they won, games 2 and 4 that series, they combined for 25 runs, but then on the same breath, they only scored 3 combined in their 2 losses. So it's very different games, but it's going to be all out. Really just an absolute battle of Lone Star teams here. I'm going to go with Angelo. They've been there, they've done that, and I think that ultimately they're going to punch a ticket to Cary, North Carolina for the 2nd consecutive season.
Absolutely. And I mean, not just 2nd consecutive season, but 4th consecutive season.
That's right.
As they typically, their typical opponent, though, is Colorado Mesa in this super regional. Ultimately, they beat them in the or no, they actually never played that. No, excuse me, they did play them. Um, Ultimately beat them in the regional to eliminate them. But very excited to see that. I know last year Angelo State for the Super Regional set attendance records in Division Two. I wonder if Lubbock can do the same here because when you watch these games, it's going to be a packed house. When you see, I doubt that there's going to be any empty seats there when you see behind home plate who's sitting in the stands with how exciting this will be. But again, we're going different ways, but hey, you know what? This will be in a very, very, very intriguing matchup between these two teams as we go to the final matchup, and we'll talk about the West region to close it out here, and that's Point Loma and Cal State Monterey Bay. Very interesting enough, they played 22 times, and well, they're tied at 11-11. So whoever wins this series will also have bragging rights in terms of total times played. And well, last time they played was February 10th, 2024. So early on in the season in a 4-game set that was originally supposed to be at Point Loma, but then weather moved it up to Monterey Bay, and Point Loma took 3 of 4 there. So they won 11-0 in that final game. But then the last time they played in the postseason was 2023, where in that 3-team regional, Point Loma lost their first game before ultimately losing again to Monterey Bay, ending their season. So very intriguing matchup. Matter of fact, this is the first time since 2018 that Monterey Bay will go to Point Loma and play each other. And well, Monterey Bay ended up sweeping that series in 2018, so it makes for a very intriguing matchup. You see the schedule there very early, but again, Carroll B. Land Stadium, one of the most beautiful Division II baseball fields you'll see. And so you'll see that in the morning there, at least Pacific time in the morning for Saturday, and then that early afternoon there on Friday, game 1. But two teams with a lot of pedigree, as both these teams won their regular season title. Both these teams won their tournament title. Matter of fact, in terms of tournament title, both of these teams went to that if necessary game. Now, Point Loma had to win twice, whereas Monterey Bay ended up winning once, playing against an opponent that they've seen a lot in San Francisco State. So Monterey Bay 6-2 in the postseason, Point Loma 7-1 as they swept through the West Regional. Monterey Bay, again, going that if necessary, not just against San Francisco State in the CCA tournament, but also in that regional. Walt White is in his 13th season. He's 405 and 265. Justin Jameson is in his 6th season. He's really turned this program around, basically being a team at the bottom of the Pac West and now consistently at the top of the Pac West. This is their 3rd straight appearance in the regional. They were the national runner-up, losing to North Greenville in 2022. As now for Walt White, this is a back-to-back super regional appearance. They appeared last year, ultimately losing to San Bernardino, but they also won 3 straight CCAA regular season titles. So teams on the West Coast with a lot of pedigree here. So we'll get into some of the players. First, in the West region with Point Loma, the West Region Player of the Year and the Pac West Player of the Year, Scott Anderson, 407, 464, 765, 15 home runs, and 66 RBI. The crazy part is this is the 3rd straight year that Point Loma has represented as the West Region Player of the Year. So go back 2 years ago, it was two-way player Baxter Holligan. And then last year it was standout Jacob Christian in 2023 who won player of the year. Now it's Scott Anderson, and he's leading the charge there for the Sea Lion offense. And other guys, first team All-Pac West, Eric Smelko, hitting 382 with an OPS over 1,100. I'm sure he thought he was going to be an All-West regional selection, ultimately didn't. But he performed well in the postseason. He had his 10th home run there in that final game before advancing to the Supers. Jake Trenkin hitting 370. He was a second team All-West region, same OPS as Eric Smelko, 14 home runs, 61 driven in. And then we also got to talk about a couple guys on the staff. But first, we got to talk about Dylan Miller, who was the Pac West Co-Player of the Year with Jake Covey at Concordia Irvine, pitcher of the year, and then first team All West region. He went 11-2 in 15 starts or 15 appearances, all starts, 94 innings, a 3.35 ERA, 88 strikeouts, 262 batting average against, and a 1.26 WHIP. But we also have to talk about a guy who's, in terms of workhorses out of the bullpen, it's James Sashin. He's appeared in all but one game in the postseason for Point Loma. First team All West region. He's the D2 leader in saves. He's also tied for the Point Loma career record in saves with 17. 1-0 in 26 appearances, 33 1/3 innings, 2.43 ERA, 39 strikeouts to just 5 walks. A guy that pounds the zone, a 2.03 batting average and a .93 WHIP. So expect to see Sashin probably, if it does get to a third game, in all 3 games. But and on the flip side, you have Monterey Bay, who's really put up an offense with these 3 guys. And I mean, it's more guys than just these 3, but the 3 guys we'd like to highlight: Jaden Shepard, first team All West region, hitting .361, 14 home runs, 60 RBI. Big dude at 6'6" there. KW Kulichi, first team All West region, .360 with an OPS at 1,125, 10 home runs, 50 RBI. JJ Engman has 10 home runs, hitting .356. He was a second team All West region. Then on the mound, you have the game one, well, not the game one guy, but an honorable mention, All West region, Mitchell Torres, 5-1, 64 2/3 innings, 3.34 ERA, 268 batting average, 1.56 WHIP. And then a guy who was injured but gave up his first earned runs all season in the title game, Ryan Eo, who is 5-0 in 9 appearances, a .98 ERA, 18 1/3 innings. He'll be relied on heavily. 17 strikeouts to 5 walks, a 1.2 WHIP, and a 254 batting average against. So excited to see a matchup of West stalwarts. Will, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see. I think that, I mean, that's a common theme, right? Throughout these breakdowns, these are all going to be fun. But I think when you break down this matchup, Dylan Miller going presumably, I mean, he's going in game 1. Entrican on the other side, perhaps, from what we understand. However, you got Entrican, Smelko, and Anderson when you look at this offense, and then Miller. So one side of the box score, you got Dylan Miller. And on the other side, you got these 3 big bats who are really good, including the player of the year in that region, and Scott Anderson. Then on the other side, you look at Quilici. I'm a big fan of his game. Jaden Shepard, you got to be a big fan of him. He's a big guy. And Quilici's a big guy, too. A couple of big guys who can just hammer the ball. Engman's shown the ability to be a great hitter this season. So 3 really standout hitters in each middle of each order. And then you got a couple of really just good arms. It's Ryan Eo, right? We learned that yesterday, I believe we're getting that right. And the interesting thing for Monterey Bay is they have a lot of bullpen efforts. They have a lot of guys. Mitchell Torres, a guy probably going game 2 for them. One of their top starters, 5-1. But they got a lot of guys out of the bullpen that are just now getting healthy. So I think that they're going to have more resources than maybe people expect. And these 2 teams met earlier in the season. Point Loma got the best of them. Point Loma trying to go back to the national championships, and they were runners-up just a couple of years ago. They certainly have the makeup to do that. Dylan Miller is as good as it gets. I just think it's hard to pick against Point Loma because you think that game 1 favors them so heavily. And when you win game 1, a lot of the times that favors you for the rest of the series because they have such a talented arm. But Monterey Bay shows that, hey, you can knock us down, but we're going to get right back up, as they scored 5 runs in the top of the 9th to win the conference title game. They scored 5 runs in the top of the 9th to win their regional pot as well. So they're comeback kids. They're thrilling effort kids. They're a team now that has won 3 consecutive conference titles. They've been chased over the last 3 seasons by different teams. They're kind of the ones, the kings of their conference right now. And I think that they have a ton of confidence going to play in San Diego at a beautiful facility. But ultimately, I'm going to go with PLNU to move on.
Yeah, I'm going to go with PLNU as well in that best of three. But an interesting storyline there is the likely game two starter for Point Loma. Austin Coleman actually had super regional experience against Monterey Bay a year ago when he pitched for Cal State San Bernardino, ultimately beating them in game one, where they ended up beating ultimately who is probably the game one starter for Monterey Bay and Nate Rolachek. And matter of fact, within that game, Ryan Eo threw 4 2/3 of shutout ball in that game as well. So I fully expect a very interesting matchup there, as Coleman probably has the inside information, if you will, on this Monterey Bay team, because between San Bernardino and Monterey Bay last year, they played 11 times, which was absolutely, or excuse me, 9 times, which was absolutely wild there. So I'm sure that there's plenty of information there going around. So give me Point Loma at home, what representing the West region. Again, you have similar offenses, but I think the pitching heavily sides Point Loma in this series. So give me Point Loma in a best of three to advance to carry. So those are our super regional previews, breakdowns. We're looking forward to it. The action begins Friday. We're excited for it, and we can't wait to cover all of the Division II baseball super regionals. But Will, do you have any final parting thoughts before we send it off?
I just think we should gear up for a big day of baseball. One nice thing is that Saturday, barring weather, everybody is going to punch a ticket to Cary, North Carolina, because if the series goes 2 games, it ends Saturday. If the series goes 3 games, it ends Saturday. Expect it now. Things could change barring weather, perhaps Sunday, but yeah, I mean, that is exciting. You get a day on Friday to start the series off and Saturday to finish them off. So Friday, Saturday, super regional action. It's going to be a lot of fun. One thing I will say is if you like this content and you like this coverage, well, follow at DIVII Baseball. That's probably what you are doing now. If you found yourself to watching this video on DIVII's YouTube channel and probably found it perhaps through our Twitter, and we're great. Grateful to have that platform on Twitter/X to continue to highlight everything that's going across the country. And we're certainly grateful for all the people that appreciate that. But again, that's going to be your home to find out everything upcoming this week as well. So it should be a lot of fun. And that was a common theme throughout these breakdowns. But I'm really excited to see who's ultimately going to punch a ticket to Cary, North Carolina, because that's the dream. When you talk about 200 plus teams, that's the dream, to get to Cary, and only 8 get to do it. And it's going to be fun to see who does.
It will be beyond fun to see who does it, who gets the job done. Again, Friday, we're excited for it. We can't wait, and we're excited to track all of this and be able to share it with all of you, the D2 baseball fans and community. But thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoy this upcoming weekend with the Super Regionals.